very good afternoon to you all. Thanks for joining us this Wednesday lunchtime once again for number 10 in our series. We're on the home stretch, and for those joining us once again, it's really appreciated that you join us. And for those new, thank you, and I hope that you enjoyed today's session from our guest speaker. For those who are new or again don't catch every single session, we do record these. They are available to you post sessions as registrants, so please ensure you keep track if you find the sessions are of interest. And for those joining late, there is a delay if you join from start, so you have that flexibility to watch at your own pace. But hopefully you can join in the Q&A at the end of today's session. So what we're trying to do is sharing knowledge and perspectives and addressing the national and global challenges. And today's speaker, Professor Sam Cromie, will just kind of position his work within that context. And I suppose just as a reminder, we're trying to position ourselves in terms of climate action at a national level and indeed at an international level through the SDGs. And I think it's important that we contextualize what we do and how it has impact in society. So today, I'm kind of maybe going faster than I typically do, but I want to give as much time to our speaker to give his in his words, the context of his talk. Now, provisionally, I had provided a title, Transitioning to a Sustainable Green Organisation. Sam, your title might be perhaps a little bit different to that, but the context of where you're coming from, the work that you do, is taking the human element and considering that in decision making or in sustainability. And I'm looking forward to your talk. As always, for those of you who want to ask questions of Sam, please do add it to the Q&A tab or even the chat function throughout the session. And later on, we can raise your hands, pitch your question directly to Sam, or I'll relay it if it's through the Q&A. So Sam, I welcome you to maybe turn on your camera and mic. I'm going to stop sharing. I'll let you introduce yourself probably as better than I can do, maybe your background, where you're coming from as part of your introduction, and I look forward to your talk. Thanks a lot.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear me okay. As John mentioned there, actually, can you see my screen okay there, John?
Perfectly.
It's coming across fine. Okay, good. So just in terms of my background, I'm Professor Sam Cromie, and I'm the director of the Centre for Innovative Human Systems here in Trinity College Dublin. And I'm based in the School of Psychology, but our centre is multidisciplinary. So we take people from all disciplines across college who have an interest in the work that we're doing. So as John mentioned, I'm going to be talking about transitioning to a sustainable green organization and some of the challenges that organizations face and some of the tools that they can use to help transition. So in terms of my own research and focus, most of my research related to sustainability is around sustainable travel, and it's trying to understand trip decisions that people make and what influences those trip decisions and how we can influence them, either by redesigning the infrastructure or designing the decision-making architecture. I'm particularly interested in apps and trip decision apps and how people interact with them and how we can use them perhaps to nudge people to more sustainable modes. I'm also very interested in businesses and how businesses build in sustainability and how they can become more sustainable, and some of the challenges and organizational challenges around that area. In terms of the sustainable development goals, that work then would cover quite a number of different SDGs, some more obvious around climate action, sustainable cities and communities. But our work in the centre is also very much about good health and well-being and about the people that are working in organizations, because they are when you redesign an organization to make it sustainable for the environment, you also need to consider the people. And we find the two work very much hand in hand, and often the economic systems and the business models that we have deployed that are bad for the environment are often very bad for well-being as well. And we can get a win-win by trying to address those two goals at the same time. So as I mentioned, I'm in a center called the Center for Innovative Human Systems, which is a bit of a convoluted title, but it makes it a little bit more sense maybe if you look at our mission. And our big statement is systems and processes have to work for people, and they can only do this if the role of humans is central. So we've been going as a center for about 30 years at this stage, so we're one of the older centers in the college. And we've been working over those years with many different sectors. We would have started off in aviation with very much a focus on safety. And then as our work's developed, we've diversified into other sectors, looking at safety, looking at risk, and increasingly looking at sustainability and well-being as outcomes. But it's really the same lens that we take to all the challenges that we look at. We look at the organization and the organization within its sector as a system, and we try and understand that system. And I'll be talking a bit later on about some of those systems concepts and how they can be applied to understand and influence sustainability. So this is just a glimpse of some of the sectors that we're working in. As I said, aviation would be our home base, if you like, but probably most of our work at this stage is in the healthcare area and patient safety. And we're structured around a number of different clusters, and you see in the middle of there is sustainable behavior, which is where this work I'm talking about comes along. As well as doing research, we run a number of courses. We run a master's course and we run short courses. And much of the content in this presentation today comes from a course in sustainable green organizations that we deliver as a short course, but we also deliver it as part of a number of other master's courses within the college. So sustainability and the role of organizations. When you look at the contributors to greenhouse gases and industrial and emissions within our society, business has a disproportionate contribution. So a couple of stats here: the 100 companies in the world are responsible for 71% of emissions, and there's an example there of the top 15 US food and beverage companies, and that's just at the top scale. Those are the big players. But every organization, every company that's carrying out business has a potential and usually an actual significant impact on the environment, both in terms of greenhouse gases, in terms of impact on biodiversity, etc., and on land use and etc. So it's a significant issue, and I think there's a lot more leverage in many ways at the business level than there is at the individual level to create influence. So where's the problem? The fundamental problem on sustainability from a business point of view is the linear economy. And it's the default option that we have been operating with for the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years, where we have assumed that the Earth's resources are unlimited and that we can just keep using, generating, producing more stuff, selling more stuff to consumers, and consumers have got used to getting new stuff all the time. Something breaks down, you just scrap it, and you get a new one. You dump it, and so it's this idea that the assumption of limited resources, the implication that we can keep producing those resources, those products ad infinitum, and just generating waste without any concern for the environment. And unfortunately, that's really very much built into our economy as a default option, and most business models are built around the linear economy. And so this is the big challenge. And I want to present three different ways of conceptualizing business, different economic models that are different ways of looking at it that businesses can adopt. Some of these you may be familiar with, some of you may not. So the circular economy is very directly a contrast to the linear economy. It's emphasizing the fact that we can't just keep producing and using the world's resources. We have to start regenerating, putting resources back in. And as we are doing every aspect of our business, to be thinking about minimizing the amount of resources we use, designing things so they can be repurposed, they can be recycled, they can be designing things so they can be repaired, designing things so they can be they will last, etc. And so that's a fundamental concept that is very important. The second one is the idea of donut economics, and this is particularly important for businesses to take into account both the social and the environmental impact of their activities. And so the idea of donut economics is that we were operating within a donut, and if we extend ourselves too much, we're overshooting our environmental boundaries, and we're using more resources than we should in terms of the environment that is good. On the other hand, if there's a social foundation, and if we fall short of that foundation, then we're not delivering the social impact that we should have. So it's the challenge is to maintain our activity between those two boundaries. And then finally, the triple bottom line is maybe the simplest way of thinking of making a business sustainable, is fundamentally saying that instead of just having a single bottom line where you're focused on profit, you're generating a triple bottom line where you're equally looking at people and planet. And this was introduced by John Elkington in 94, quite some time ago. But he's recently been quite discouraged by the impact of it, whereas a lot of business have given lip service to the triple bottom line. The reality, he says, is that the profit does trump all others, and that, as that quote says down below, corporate leaders move heaven and earth to ensure they hit their profit targets. But the same is very true of the people and planet targets. And I think that's quite an accurate observation of most organizations and how they operate. But there are very encouraging signs that increasingly a lot of organizations are trying to rebalance, and some are very significantly rebalancing their focus. So systems thinking, and why is it needed for sustainability? So the first issue is the nature of the problem, of sustainability. And there's a quote here from Thatcher and Yeo. What we're experiencing now as a planet is a complex web of interacting systems known as wicked problems, or even super wicked problems. Wicked and super wicked problems are characterized by being difficult to define, where the leading causes of the problems, i.e. humans, are also expected to find the solutions, with no obvious right or wrong answers, and with rapidly approaching deadlines. And so sustainability and the environmental crisis that we're facing very much fits into this challenge. And with challenges like that, a single solution is not going to solve it, and one individual is not going to be able to come up with a solution. It needs to be multi-pronged, systemic approach to it. The other key thing, I think, which is found across our society and globally as well, is the lack of joined up thinking around sustainability. And So the illustration of this is, I was at a transport research day in Brussels, where all the different organizations interested in transport research, from manufacturers to airlines to bus operators to academics and policymakers, etc. They were all gathering to as a sort of networking event around the EU research funding strategy. And I was in this meeting on the right, where we were discussing the environmental impact of autonomous technology. And this is a stock photo of the room. So there was actually a lot less people in it than that. There was a few people discussing whether AV technology would have a positive or negative impact on the environment. In the room next door, it was obviously the much bigger room. It's the big chamber, and it was packed with people talking about the technology itself and how to develop it, and with very little to any interest in the sustainability of it. So it was quite clear that there was a huge industrial and research agenda about developing these vehicles, selling them, and producing them and selling them, and keeping that linear economy around the automotive industry going, while there was only a few stakeholders interested in how is that going to impact society and the environment. And they were both being facilitated by the EU, who have got policies that are supposed to promote the environmental action, but at the same time have to keep all the different stakeholders happy and manage the politics, etc. So that lack of joined up thinking is something you'll find across all of society. And it means in a business context, you find it in individual organizations where one arm of them is trying to be more sustainable, but other people are making unsustainable decisions in procurement, in travel, etc. So I want to introduce the concept of socio-technical systems and illustrate how it can be used to understand sustainability and sustainable actions. So socio-technical systems is the primary framework that we use within our research center to understand industrial context, whether it's healthcare or aviation or pharmaceutical sector or wherever it is. And the idea here is that you tend to have, with a lot of problems that are faced, that industry face, you've got technical solutions and you've got human solutions, but very often they're not working together. So you've got great inventors that are coming up with innovative technologies that they think will solve the problem. And on the other hand, you've got often a lot of very simplistic psychology trying to motivate people to change their behavior. But when the innovations are introduced in an organization, often they're not designed in a way that people actually use them. So they don't actually work together. So this is where we take the approach of socio-technical system. And the assumption is people are only one part of the system, and that if effective change only happens when the interactions of people and the other aspects of the system are effectively addressed. And those aspects are technology, information, the environment, and people. So it's an interlinked system of those different elements intended to achieve explicit outcomes. And normally within a business context, the explicit outcomes would be profit, but often safety, well-being would be made explicit as well, and increasingly the environmental impact is being made more explicit. And the socio-technical system achieves those outcomes to varying degrees of effectiveness, but also incidentally achieves implicit and positive and negative outcomes. And so very often the environmental impact has been an implicit negative outcome that people haven't really been thinking about very much, and they haven't been designing the system to address the environmental impact. But increasingly now, you can use the concept of the socio-technical system, you can redesign it with that as an explicit outcome. So here's an example of one way of breaking down a socio-technical system. So this breaks it down into the structure, say the organization of the system. That would be the organizational structure, the physical system, the actual hardware, software, facilities you're using, the task, the work itself that you carry out, and then the people, both the cognitive and social aspects of the people that interact within the system. So I've illustrated this with the transport system, which is my primary area of research. So the idea here is, in order to influence the transport system, instead of just understanding people or just building infrastructure, you need to understand how the people interact with the infrastructure, the sort of tasks they're doing, how it relates to regulations, to policy, etc. So under the structure, we've put regulations, policy, government policy, rules of the road, tax, insurance, transport schedules, police enforcement. All have very definite influences on people's travel decisions and etc. And under the physical system, you've got vehicles, infrastructure, planning apps, transport schedules, etc. And then under people, you've got people's motivation, values, expectations, skills, culture. I should have norms in there because norms are very influential in terms of travel. We tend to be reluctant to step outside what we think other people approve of in terms of travel decisions. And then finally, the actual tasks that we do when we're interacting with the transport system, checking travel schedules, encountering traffic, dealing with traffic, the different types of trips that we take, and the constraints on our trips, whether it's rain or we've stop-offs to make on the way, or we don't like crowding on buses. So there's all manner of issues to do with the design of the task itself. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the socio-technical system and how we break it down to try and understand the influences on decisions there. So some of the challenges to taking a systems approach to sustainability. I've identified 6 challenges here. First one is the minimization response. So the minimization response is when we're faced with a massive big problem like sustainability, we tend to try and make it manageable, and we minimize it, and we'll come up with little phrases like if we all do a bit for the environment, it'll make a difference. So the implication is that an accumulation of millions of these little small micro actions, such as using a keep cup or doing a recycling, will somehow address the massive environmental challenges that we're facing. And the truth is it won't. Much more substantial and systemic changes are needed across our society and across our organizations. So often in organizations will focus on, they'll have a sustainability committee that will focus on 1 or 2 things, such as not using paper cups in the coffee machine or that sort of thing, rather than substantially looking at the business's footprint. Expecting too much from consumers is a big issue. So, and again, this is where businesses taking their responsibility is important. We expect there's too much of the emphasis in environmental promotion on trying to get individuals to change their behavior without addressing the social context and the business context of that behavior. Also, over-dependence on consumer knowledge. The decisions around sustainability and can be quite complex. So, which travel mode is better to take, in which circumstance, which foods are more sustainable than which others, and why, is very difficult for consumers to stay ahead of. And even the most knowledgeable people won't be necessarily making good decisions based on their knowledge, and the vast majority of people will have very limited knowledge. So often those decisions will need to be made, and that knowledge given to consumers in much more simplistic fashion. Virtue signaling and greenwashing. So virtue signaling is the individual version, where it's a public expression of a moral viewpoint with the intent of communicating one's own good character. So this is where, again, the focus on recycling, on keep cups, easy ways to look like you're being sustainable, but not actually making a huge impact because you're not changing the real factors that impact the environment. And then greenwashing is the company version, the organizational version of it. The fashionability of sustainability. So it becomes fashionable to have the new sustainable gadget. So it's feeding the linear economy with sustainable produce and merchandise. And again, guilt tripping is over dependence on individual moral decisions, which will not change that much. So how can I make my organization more sustainable? Obviously, there's a lot of different actions you can take, and I'll summarize them here, and then I'll just focus in on one or two of these. So making sense of the context. So you need to understand your own business in the context of its sector. So what are the sustainability challenges of the sector? How does your business function within that? And then mapping out your own business. And I look at that in a minute. How is your business impacting sustainability? To gather the data on that. Measuring, what level of impact is it having? So mapping is more about understanding how that impact is having. Measuring is about measuring it so that you can know if you've changed it. And then making sense of the process, or modeling it again, is about understanding the activities that you're doing and how they are influencing and having their impact. Then obviously making a difference is about how and where do you intervene, and finally monitoring, evaluating, and reporting is critical. So this is about mapping your business. So we tend to focus, and most businesses tend to look at things such as their energy, their travel, and their waste, and be quite clear on those. But there's other aspects, their resource consumption, biodiversity. What impact is your organization having on biodiversity? Where is it generating pollution? Does it have grounds, and what's happening on those grounds in terms of positive or negative impact on biodiversity? And then apart from the operations, it's critical to look at three other elements. There's the upstream, so the environmental impact of the products and services that you're purchasing as a business. And then the downstream, the impact of the products and the services that you provide to your customers, and how do they use them, and what's the implications there. And then finally, contractors. So often organizations try and minimize or they're trying to greenwash themselves by controlling certain aspects and making their operations very environmentally positive, while neglecting the upstream, downstream, and contractor factors. And then there's the big elephant in the room at the top is, what's your core business model, and is it sustainable? So if your core business model, if you're a motor industry manufacturer, your core business model is about producing more and more goods, and you make more profit when you use more of the world's resources. So it's fundamentally unsustainable. And in order to make it sustainable, or more sustainable, you need to look at either using entirely or mostly renewable resources, or changing the model, such as a mobility as a service model. So you're incentivized not to produce more goods, but to provide a service and incentivized to keep those goods going as long as possible, so that you can most efficiently provide that service. In terms of measuring, there's a range of resources. I think measuring is where organizations feel very overwhelmed, because it gets very complex very quickly, and especially smaller businesses find it very challenging to know what to measure, how to measure, and the resources to do it. What I've put up here is a number of different organizations that provide support for this. So the Global Reporting Initiative has reporting standards which really regulate or provide standards for how each sector should report. The GRA standards are universal standards, but there's also sector-specific standards. So you can download one relevant to your sector or to a specific topic and get more information on it. So that's very good detail there. There are other couple of other websites here that are useful, particularly compareyourfootprint.com is a cheaper way to carbon footprint an organization, particularly suitable for smaller organizations that can use it to measure. And then finally, I just want to wrap up with the concept of triple layered business model canvas. So we looked earlier at the triple layered or the three Ps, the triple bottom line, the profit, people, and planet, and the idea that we should be equally valuing all of those. So the triple layered business canvas provides a framework for doing this. So many of you will be familiar with an economic business canvas, where you map out your basic value proposition and how the customers, the partners, etc., come together to generate that value, that profit for you. So the triple-layered business model canvas adds on an environmental and a social canvas, and in using those, you can evaluate how your business is generating or could generate benefit in both socially and environmentally, as well as financially. Okay, I hope that's been helpful to you. I'll wrap it up there, and I don't know, do people get these slides afterwards, John, or?
Typically we just have the recording so they can watch it back.
Okay.
So that's a win-win, I suppose, that way.
I put up a little what do you call that? A little
QR code.
QR code, yeah, on my last slide there, just in case you're interested in connecting with us as a center, and we're open to collaborating with people, so that's an option.
Sam, I thank you very much for your time, and we're coming to the end.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate that, and you brought together a lot of concepts from previous speakers into this kind of into your talk, and yeah, find a way to gel it all together, which I really appreciate. Thank you very much. So everyone, just as usual, just to close, Sam's research, he's highlighted it through his own slides and content, but you can find more on the kind of courses that Sam coordinates and leads and is involved in, as well as his active research via Trinity's courses and research sections, or just search Sam Cromie Trinity, and I'm sure you'll find him very easily. Next week, we're taking to the skies in transport. We're looking at decarbonising aviation. So as much as we talked about, do we need to drive, do we need to fly, but if we are going to, how can we decarbonise aviation for Ireland in the future as an island nation? It's still going to be a big part of our transport requirements, not our requirements, but our usage into the future, no doubt. So this time next week, I look forward to you joining us. We'll share a recording as always to those registered. So you register for future sessions, can't make it, we'll make sure that you get the details. And so that way, keep signing up to the sessions, and please share with people who might be interested. Sam, thank you very much once again for joining us today.
Thanks, John.
Lunchtime. thanks to you, those of you who've stayed with us for the hour, and have a great day.